Let's read the following quote together. The French have already discovered that the blackness of the skin is no reason why human beings should be abandoned without redress to the caprice of a tormentor. It may come one day to be recognized that the number of legs, the velocity of the skin, or the termination of the os sacrum are reasons equally insufficient for abandoning a sensitive being to the same fate. What else is it that should trace this insuperable line? Is it the faculty of reason, or perhaps the faculty for discourse? The question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? The preceding quotation is excerpted from Jeremy Bentham's Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation, published in 1789. Bentham was a great friend of James Mill, father of John Stuart Mill, so you won't be surprised to learn that Jeremy and James were the two that got John Stuart Mill into the philosophy of utilitarianism. Bentham's point: utilitarianism's creed that one should seek the greatest happiness for the greatest number should not be restricted to human beings. Rather, it should extend to all sentient beings, that is, to all beings capable of suffering or experiencing pleasure. Typically, utilitarians agree about this. Since animals can suffer and feel pleasure or happiness, their interests should be factored into the utilitarian calculus. Sentient just means able to feel or perceive. Here is a utilitarian argument for treating animals well. Premise 1. You should do what brings about the greatest happiness for the greatest number of sentient beings. Premise 2. Actions that harm animals often fail to bring about the greatest happiness for the greatest number of sentient beings. Conclusion, therefore... Oh no, that's calm. Shoot, he just tore my argument with his elbow. Here's a puzzle for utilitarians. When I began teaching as a teaching assistant at the end of the 1980s, I found an article about a gorilla, Ivan, that was kept in a cage at the mall. Finally, after 27 years, he was being sent to a better home in the Atlanta Zoo. Living in the cage at the mall didn't give him much room to move around or much fun to have. He tended to pace back and forth most of the day. However, his presence in that cage did give lots and lots of children who visited the mall pleasure, thousands upon thousands, over 25 years. So didn't keeping him in the cage ultimately produce the greatest happiness for the greatest number? You see the problem. Why should it be that we believe a moral theory that says it's okay to mistreat one being simply because a bunch of other beings get pleasure from it? Well, John Stuart Mill has an answer. Unlike Bentham, Mill distinguishes not just the quantity of pleasures, but the quality. Some pleasures are cheap, low-grade pleasures, while others are high-grade. In this case, the mall gorilla was giving kids lots of pleasure, but it was cheap, low-grade pleasure. And, unfortunately, the pain that the gorilla experienced was high-grade suffering. To prove the point, Mill asks this: suppose you could be hooked to a machine and get 100 million units of child-seeing gorilla pleasure, but in order to get it, you'd have to give up the pleasure, less in quantity, that you get from being free to come and go as you please. Would you? Mill thinks most will say no, so the child seeing gorilla pleasure is cheap, low-grade pleasure. Okay, think about the difference between 1 ounce of Dollar Tree Easter egg chocolate and 1 ounce of that good Toblerone chocolate. The amount is the same, but the quality is different. So with Mill's distinction in mind, we can give this revised utilitarian argument for treating animals well. Premise 1. You should do what brings about the greatest high-quality happiness for the greatest number of sentient beings. Premise 2. Keeping the gorilla in the cage at the mall failed to bring about the greatest high-grade happiness for the greatest number of sentient beings, even though it produced a lot of low-grade happiness for human beings. So, therefore, keeping the gorilla in the cage at the mall was morally wrong. So see how this works. It's true that keeping the gorilla in the cage all those years produced a net greater amount of pleasure. But even though it produced an amount of pleasure that was greater in number, it wasn't the greatest amount of high-quality pleasure. In other words, the high-quality suffering that the gorilla experienced outweighed the cheap, low-grade, low-quality pleasure that the kids got from looking at the gorilla. Because think about what that pleasure is like. It's just a momentary, ooh, neat, kind of an excitement. But that doesn't outweigh genuine, deep suffering, which is what the gorilla felt. And now we move to Immanuel Kant's view on animals. Maybe Kant's categorical imperative, when extended to animals, will give us an argument for respecting them. However, Kant himself thought we have no direct duties to animals. Oh no, Kenny, this joke is not funny. The AI is terrible. Let's forget this, please. Let's move on. But so far as animals are concerned, we have no direct duties. Animals are not self-conscious and are there merely as a means to an end. That end is man. Our duties toward animals are merely indirect duties toward humanity. Thus, if a dog has served his master long and faithfully, his service, on the analogy of human service, deserves reward, and when the dog has grown too old to serve, his master ought to keep him until he dies. Such an action helps to support us in our duties toward human beings, where they are bounden duties. If he is not to stifle his human feelings, he must practice kindness toward animals, for he who is cruel to animals becomes hard also in his dealings with men.
Where's my dog? What'd you do with it?
Think about all those movies where you see the serial killer starts out killing animals when he's young, like he kills the family pet. And that's actually true. Like they've found that people who are serial killers usually have a history of animal abuse too. So that's Kant's point. He thinks the reason it's wrong for you to bury a kitty cat up to its neck and then run over its head with a lawnmower, that kind of thing, those acts of cruelty they're wrong because they'll make it more likely that you'll do something like that to a human, that you'll be abusive toward humans. So the Kantian argument about animal welfare goes like this. Premise 1. Always treat self-conscious beings not as mere means, but as an end. Premise 2. Animals are not self-conscious. Conclusion. Therefore, you have no direct duty to treat them well. However, we still have Kant's indirect duty argument about animal welfare. Premise 1. If you don't treat animals with respect, then you are more likely to treat humans without respect. Premise 2. But you should always act in ways that make it more likely you will treat others not as mere means but as ends. That is to say, you should do what makes it more likely that you will treat humans with respect. Conclusion, therefore you should treat animals with respect, just to get into a habit that will make you treat humans with respect.